All right, in today's video, we're going to be completely tearing down all the way to the internal cartridge a race face effect dropper post. These are great dropper posts, a solid build, but after a while they need to be serviced. And so we're going to do a deep dive into this and show you how to do that. Before you get started and dive into this, you need to have a handful of tools ready to go. An adjustable wrench. You're going to need some kind of caliper. A valve core remover. And then either snap ring pliers, something like this, or just a very small tipped plier to get to some of the parts inside. And then either a 2 or a 2.5 millimeter hex key. And with these limited tools, you should be able to do most of this project. You will also need lightweight oil and a place to dump that oil when you come out of the internal cartridge. Okay, the first thing that you're going to want to do is remove the black rubber cap off of the top. And then here you're going to see where we put the air in the fork, and we're going to try to remove the air pressure from here. It's a good idea to cover the top so that if any oil spills out or sprays out when you depress it. Okay, just like that. And then you're going to use your valve core remover to remove the valve core. That will make sure all the air is out. Take that and make sure you set it aside in a safe place. Okay, so step one is going to be to remove the seat post collar, the dust wiper. If it won't come loose just by hand, one of the things that you can do is to use an old tube to help you get leverage on it. And just wrap the top here a couple of times. And it'll come loose. If that doesn't work, you can use either the same length of tube or a different piece of tube to give you leverage down here on the bottom, and then do it like that. If that fails and you have a bike stand, you can put your seat post in a bike stand using the tube to grab the seat post collar. And if that fails, try putting the seat post back in your bike and using the bike to hold the base while you unscrew the lid. So you just want to scoot that to the top. And then step two is going to be to remove the actuator from the bottom. Okay, for the actuator, you can use either a 16 millimeter open-ended wrench spanner or an adjustable wrench like this. Same thing, if it's tight, you can hold the base here using a piece of rubber tube to give you more leverage, but it shouldn't be too bad. So when you get that off, then you need to pull it open, and you'll see the post sliding like this. That's okay, it's exactly what you want. On the actuator, you're gonna have 2 holes here. Inside of that hole is a screw that uses a 2 millimeter Allen key to undo. So we're just gonna slide that in there and undo these. Then the actuator should come off the end here. There's a part in there that we can take out later for cleaning. We're gonna have this rubber grommet or rubber stopper, followed by 2 foams. Just like that. And now we're ready to remove the outer portion from the inner portion. We just give that a tug and there we go. So now we're ready to start removing this stuff and the collar so that we can get to the cartridge in the inside. We need to take this bushing off. Want to be gentle so you don't stretch them too far or break them. After that bushing, then we've got these brass guides to work with. They shouldn't be too hard to get off. If they are, you can grab them with a set of pliers and pull on them. Okay, I'm going to set those aside as well. And then that collar, that bushing should just slide off. And then after that, then we can just slide this bushing off as well. I'm sorry. We can just slide this collar off. We're pretty far into the breakdown. In order to get the cartridge out of here, we're gonna unscrew from this end. And that is where you're gonna need either your snap ring pliers or a needle nose plier like this. And see there's little slots there. So you just slot it up and then rotate. It's easier to hold the post. I'm sorry, hold the pliers while you spin the post. See that come out? You want to set that aside. And then there's the cartridge. And in order to open up the cartridge, we're going to use our snap ring pliers to grab a hold of these, and then in a similar method, just undo it. Now again, you want to be careful to try not and scratch the post here. It's just same idea, a little easier to twist the post while you hold the snap ring pliers in place. And you'll get to a point where then you can just do it by hand. Okay, so now it's open. You should have some oil in here, so you need a plastic cup nearby to pour that oil out into. Just pour the oil out. To put it back. So at this point, you could pull that end off just like that. And then we're gonna work on getting this post out. It's got a little bit of air pressure built up in there. Almost like a upside down. Just pull on it and it comes right out. Now we've got another tube down in here. that we're going to try to get that out as well, and so that we can clean it all up. And one of the ways that we can do that is by just putting this back right in the top there and then using it to try to get leverage. It might take a few attempts. And you can see I got it and able to take it out. Got some more oil in there, so be aware of that. I'm pouring it out in my cup. Okay, and then the last step is going to be a floating piston that's down inside of here, and I'll show you how to get that out. Okay, in order to get this piston out, the floating piston, you have two options. You can unscrew the valve from this side and then push it out with a wooden dowel or something like that. But another option is a little trick where you can drop a handful of zip ties down inside here. Putting the fat in first. And when you kind of got it all filled up like that, you just grab them and yank. And then it will pull that out without too much of a hassle. And that is the full tear down of this post. I'll show you what you should have all lined up sitting on your work desk now. Okay, now that you have it all open, you want to go ahead and clean each part using rubbing alcohol and either paper towels or a lint-free towel. So pretty simple, just spray things down with the rubbing alcohol and then wipe it off with a cloth. Pay particular attention to the rubber foams. If you spray them with alcohol, and then squeeze them with a paper towel, the dirt will kind of come out of there, dissipate out of there. A lot like doing the foam rings on your fork. You don't want to get too aggressive, otherwise you'll stretch them out, but basically just working them. You basically follow the same procedure for all of your parts here. And particularly on the outer tubing, you want to make sure that you're cleaning very thoroughly down inside of here, looking at the ridges and stuff like that. And similarly, with the shaft here, you want to make sure that you're cleaning out where the brass guides go, as well as giving the brass guides a good clean. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and clean this up, and then we'll come back and start to assemble it. I do want to make a special mention of the seal head here. Looks a lot like a fork seal, and it's got like a spring here that you can take off. You can see it's really dirty. It needs to be cleaned out. And then you can make sure that you get in here and clean this out really well. Using cloth, using Q-tips, whatever you need to make sure that you get into this seal head and up underneath here. To get all that gunk out, this is where the majority of some of the slide action happens, and so just needs to be given careful attention to. If you're really into it, you could remove the dust wiper, but I don't necessarily recommend that. You should be able to clean it without removing it. So anyway, just special note here, you want to make sure you really focus on the dust wiper and the top cap here. Okay, once you got everything cleaned up, it's time to start putting it back together. And we're going to start with the cartridge that goes in the middle here. And the first thing that we have to do is reinsert this tube. And I'm going to put a little bit of grease on the bottom of it. And then drop it down in here. And this is meant to sit in the middle of the bottom, and when it's in the right place, you'll be able to kind of snap it into place. You'll feel it set. So you know you've got it in the right place when you look down in there and it seems to be centered, and then when you turn it upside down, it doesn't come out. So you'll feel it sit in there when you get it. And the next thing that we need to do is put the floating piston in it. So we're going to take our floating piston, we're going to put some grease on it, and quite a bit. There's no reason to skimp out here. And we want to do the inside of it too. There's a O-ring in there on this side that we want to make sure we get some grease on. I'm just using Slickoleum, which is good suspension grease. You cannot use just any grease in here. You have to use a suspension grade grease, SRAM butter, RockShox butter, or the equivalent. Slickoleum, honey. Now, gotta slide this floating piston in here. Carefully. So if you're having a difficult time getting the floating piston to sit down, you can take the cap here and give it some force, and it will cause the piston to sit down around the inner tube there. And then when it gets there, we need to continue to push it down. And in fact, thanks to Q Labs in Australia, he's indicated that that needs to go down 50 milliliters. 50 millimeters. And so we're going to do our best here to try to push that down up to this particular point. Just wanting to be real gentle with it. Pushing on one side and then the other. Just double checking and making sure we're at the right distance here. So got a ways to go. So you're going to keep going until you get it sitting that 50 millimeters down in there. And when you get it that far, then it's ready for us to put the oil in. Now it's time to reassemble, and we're going to start by putting your valve core back here. Put a little bit of oil, grease on the end of it. And then we're going to screw it in. Just till it touches down. Now we're going to fill this up with oil. All the way until basically it overflows. Try to scoot this out underneath here. You can see it's just right at the top there. And now we're going to take our piston head, the internals here. Make sure those are greased up. I've already greased mine, but put some slick oleum on them and make sure they're all greased up. And then we're gonna insert it here. And when we do that, it's gonna force some of the oil that's in there out. So you can just push it in there until you feels like that seal head is connected down in there, and then you can push the seal head down here and then screw it shut. So you do it by hand until it won't turn anymore, and then when it won't turn anymore, then we'll go over to the snap ring pliers. And you want to be careful. See here on mine, that rubber seal is not wanting to cooperate. So we just want to make sure that it's staying tucked in and it's going to go down, form that tight bond we need to be able to put 250 PSI in here. So, okay, just want to show you this. As you're screwing the seal head back in, you might get to a point where it feels like it's gone all the way down, but there's still a rim here, or you might even be able to see some of the black seal there. And what's happening is that you've kind of hydro-locked it, in that the seal head can't go any further because we packed this thing so full of oil. And so I think the way that we get around this is by putting the actuator in here, and then if we compress that with our thumb, we can get this thing to drop a bit. Can get that to, just press this with my thumb, I can get that to drop a bit. And then I think this will go ahead and that will free up some room for this to be able to screw on down. And now I'm bottomed out, and it's not because of the hydrolock situation. You can see here that that seal head is sitting below the outer tube here, so it's all the way down. And then I can engage this. Okay, and then we want to make sure this is all the way out. And then we're going to fill this with 200 or 250 PSI. So put your shock pump on there and go ahead and fill it up to 200, 250 PSI. And that will help us know whether we have all of our seals are tight or not. So I'm just going to release it here and then let it sit for a second to make sure there's no oil leaking from it. Okay, so once you have let it sit for a minute and you're sure it's not leaking anywhere, it'd be a good idea to test to make sure that there's no air bubbles in here. And by putting, not a ton, but if putting some weight on here, being careful not to kink it or shift to the side so we don't bend this shaft here. But by putting some weight on here, and making sure that there's no sponge in it, there's no squishiness in it, and this is sitting tight, which means that everything in there is the way it's supposed to be. So now we can go ahead and start with the assembling of the whole seat post, which is this pretty simple process. Okay, so I have a couple of options here, but we're going to start with the outer post. And you can see down in here that you have ridges that these brass guides slide up and down, and those need to be thoroughly greased. So we're going to use our paintbrush and our grease, and we're going to spread it out as much as we can up and down in here. And not just in the in the ridges there, that's important, but just all over the inside of this post, there needs to be grease, plenty of it. And so you can hit it from the top and from the bottom so you feel like you've done an adequate job. Okay, so when you've got that adequately greased up, we can set it aside. We'll start in on the inner post here. And the first thing that needs to go on is this top cap. And make sure that we grease the inside of this really well. And there's a lot going on in here, so be generous with your grease. Get the threads. And when you're adequately satisfied that it's greased up, just go ahead and slide that on the shaft. The next thing that's going to go on is the larger bushing here. Same thing. Wipe some grease on the outside of it and on the inside of it. I'm going to go ahead and install that. Next thing we're going to put on are the brass slides. Now these, if you hold them, you can feel that one side or one edge is much sharper or flatter than the other side. So that sharp flat edge is a side that goes down in the post like this. You're going to make sure that you grease them before you put them on. So I'm gonna grease the grooves here. Sit these in here. You can kind of feel them notch into place. And then you can go ahead and put some grease on the tops of them, concentrating on the front edge, the leading edge. And then go ahead and grease this spot down here on the post where the last bushing is going to go. Take the smaller bushing, rub some grease on it, inside and out. And then you'll notice that this has got a notch on it. And that notch should line up with the middle of the brass guides. You do want to make sure that you're, just noticed that one of my brass guides was sitting in there funny, just make sure those are all okay. When you get to this point, we're now ready to insert the cartridge. Now, this part of the cartridge isn't sliding up and down, but it's not a bad idea to have a little bit of grease on there just so you don't get hot spots and rubbing on it and stuff like that. You can see here a potential hot spot on it. So go ahead and slide that in. And then the way that we secure this in here is by adding this flat washer at the top. And in the beginning, you can just rotate the cartridge to get it to a low enough point where it makes sense to switch to this. Just go until it's tight in there. Now, we're going to add some more grease to the outside of this shaft here. And now we're ready to insert this into here. Just make sure that that bushing is lined up here. And then that lines up with the back of the post. And it slides on like that. You can go ahead and screw this down. Good idea to add some little bit of grease here to the threads. Okay, now we're ready for the final stages here. Now remember, this shaft right here does move up and down, so we're going to put a little bit of grease on there, spread it out over the length of it. And then we're going to install these foam spacers. And then this rubber cap goes on there, like that. Now, in order to do the rest of it, so this is going to go on the end here like this. And then the way this works is these screws will go through here, and what they do is they line up in here and they pinch this system together like this. So we want to make sure that we've got this in the right spot and we line this up appropriately. And then insert our screws here. And what will happen is, if things don't get, if they get weird, like misaligned, then it can be hard to get everything to do what it's supposed to do. And you can double check the alignment by looking down in here. So now I know that that is lined up because it went in. So I'm just going to pull it out, sit it on here, and then push it in again. Do the same thing here on this side. And then we use our 2mm Allen, our hex key, to tighten those up. Make sure that that's firm on there. Okay, and the last step is to screw this on, and we've filled this thing, put some grease on there, and we filled the seat post with 250 psi. It's going to make it nearly impossible to compress this and get it to sit up tight. You can try activating the mechanism here and then pushing. Go. It was easier than I expected. So now we just screw this in here. You go by hand until it gets too tight. Now, what we don't want to do is strip the threads here, and remember that you may need to engage the actuator some even more. Just making sure that you're not pushing against the system here. And then we're ready to tighten this down. Thing's very slippery, so you might have to get a cloth or something to get some leverage. There you go. So you see that leading edge there is sitting down properly, and post seems to work just fine. Okay, just a note, I don't know if you just saw me struggling with the actuator there. I had to back the actuator mechanism out until I could engage it with my hand, and then while depressing the actuator, screw the bottom back in. So if you run into an issue, that's basically how it works. You know, this thing is not meant to be rocket science, so if I can test the post out now by pressing down on the actuator and then trying to engage the post. There it goes. Pops back out just like it should. So, all said and done, this is a great dropper post, easy to service and maintain. This thing will last you a lifetime. Total time to service this would be approximately an hour or maybe an hour and a half if you aren't recording it on video. Hope you liked it. Give the channel a like. Now go wrench on your own bikes.